So you've had a very long and wonderfully diverse career. Talk a little bit about how you started and where you started, and more importantly, what motivated you to get started in the STEM field.
Well, I was educated in Montgomery County Public Schools, but I graduated in chemistry, and I quickly went into information technology, and I became an engineer, systems engineer, working with
I do have to
computers.
ask, what made you choose chemistry? How did you get diverted into?
Well, my father, as I said, we didn't have very many role models, and he thought that the best education for a woman at that time was through languages. And so he was encouraging me to go to Switzerland to study languages there.
Your dad?
Yeah, my
Okay.
dad as an interpreter. But I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay here. I wanted to stay in the States and go to an American university. And so I told him that the best education I could get in science was here. And he was convinced. And so chemistry was also the hardest subject I had taken.
I was going to say, there's
Yeah.
many different ways you can go with science. And chemistry.
Chemistry is very hard. It asks you to think in a different way. And so I chose the most difficult course, the most difficult studies I
And
could.
what was that like for you?
Well, I think I made a mistake. I haven't practiced as a chemist because chemistry is very isolated. You sit in the lab and when you're looking for something, you're figuring out what a material is, but you aren't with people. And I am very much of a social person.
Very people person.
Very people person, and I care very much. And I think one aha moment was the death of President Kennedy. I was going to a lab, and I crossed a parking lot, and people in their cars had the radios turned up, and it said, "President Kennedy has just been shot." And so it was very, very much of a feeling that
It's a
was,
poignant moment
yeah.
in your life.
And I walked into the lab, and the head of the lab just said, "You're late. Come in and start your experiment." And so it wasn't important to him what had happened, a tremendous thing that happened historically here in the United
And
States.
so for someone that feels a great deal and had a very poignant moment in the parking lot trying to share it with the rest of the Americans, you walked back in and you were just treated like a robot.
Like a robot. That was what was rewarded, was for me to sit and look in the lab. I finished. I got my degree in chemistry because it was easier to finish than to start again another field. But I quickly went into the master's level, and I got into information technology.
Okay.
And so I liked physical chemistry, which had a lot of math in it, and
I'm sorry, what kind of?
physics.
Okay, yeah.
Physical chemistry.
Physical. Okay, sorry. I didn't-
Where you're not in organic chemistry. I
Okay,
didn't
sure.
like that. That was too
Sure.
much like cooking.
Sure.
And I was trained mathematically with a computer, with Fortran computers. And that was before Fortran was an accepted compiler.
Wow.
That's how old I am. But that opened the way for me, all the way. Because I went into information technology, into computers, into computer science, and it kept me ahead of everybody else.
But how many other women served as your colleagues in those environments?
I don't think there were any other women that graduated, but out of 300 that started chemistry, 7 of us graduated.
And then how did you meet those challenges in the workplace, being one of the few females there?
Well, by then I had changed into information technology.
But even then, that's a science.
That's a science, but it's not a lab and it's not isolated. I became very much interested in interested in information and data.
Okay.
And so you see it politically, how important it is to gather data, to analyze data.
Yes.
And so that got me started.
Okay.
First, very scientifically, in cancer chemotherapy and finding out reports, smoking and health. I was a smoker and I stopped smoking because of the time and the knowledge I gained in smoking and health.
You worked in the technology field for a long time. What motivated you to pivot into running for elected office?
I was very much involved with my kids going to school here, and we had lived in Latin America for a long time. But I became aware of the many Latino kids whose families had come out of the Civil War in El Salvador, and that they weren't getting the same kind of education I was getting.
Sure.
And so I decided that they needed a voice, and so there were school board elections coming up. I didn't know what I was getting into. I raised my hand, I ran for office, and I was elected. In 1990, well, I was the first Latina ever elected in Maryland and the school board. But also, might be a factoid, nationally, the Salvadoran American, the first Salvadoran American to be elected. And there are many, many Salvadoran Americans now living in the United States.
So you definitely paved the way for many, many, many others.
Well, I would hope that there'd be millions of Latinas now in government, but there aren't. Unfortunately, we're still not taking full advantage of all the opportunities in education, and we are in business because women, Latina women, are entrepreneurial.
Sure.
And they open up their. But yes, I think overall for women, there's been an enormous change because they've seen other women get elected, make
Like
a difference.
yourself?
Yeah, like myself, and like many other women today. I'm very happy to see that phenomenon because I don't think we were encouraged to the extent that
Sure.
and we didn't have the role models that you now have. And I think that is very helpful.
And so when you ran and you run for the Board of Education and you worked there for some time. How did you pivot from the Board of Education to running for state office?
Well, I began to see that a lot of the policies were being influenced by the state.
Ah, okay.
And so I wanted to be at the state level, which has not only budgetary influence, but policy influence, not only in education either, but throughout in healthcare, in salaries, in transportation. And so it's a bigger arena.
Sure.
And I was ready to move on to a bigger arena and to learn more.
And what were some of the challenges you faced at the state level that maybe you weren't anticipating?
Well, I didn't realize that the process to get a bill through it is as complicated as it is because it's very, very large, and especially the House, and you need to get so many votes, and it's about 3 or 4 steps before you get it out of the House.
Sure.
And then you have to get it through the Senate.
Do you remember the first bill you passed?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I do. I think it was when we started early voting. We had to get a constitutional amendment first to allow us to get early voting in Maryland. And one of my first bills was to change the formula in which voting places were allocated to each county rather than arbitrarily. And so I changed it so that it would be based on the population of that county.
That's fantastic.
And I changed it so that it wouldn't stay static. It would increase with the population. Of course, Montgomery County, being the largest, had the most voting places because we needed them.
And how did you feel after you passed your first
Oh,
bill?
fantastic, because very few people care about that, but I cared about it because it gave the voting, and I'm a strong believer in voting. And and I encourage people. I register to vote continuously, and I knock on doors to get people to vote.
What a great feeling.
Yes, so it to me it was very, and to those that are nerdy, I think they realized that that was an important change, because before they had been arbitrarily set for life, and Baltimore City had as many as Montgomery County, and that didn't make any sense. So the numbers are continuously come to my mind as to.
Yeah, I can see you completely lit up when you talked about that bill and how you were able to help so many voters. And part of being a voter is being educated, and that's also near and dear to your heart.
Well, not too long ago, we only had one day to vote, and that's on a Tuesday. So many people can't vote. They can't get off from their jobs. So
Sure.
Early voting opened the doors to increase the number of people that were able to vote.
Well, thank you. And speaking of opening doors, what advice would you give to young women and girls as they start to embark on their career?
Well, I want them to know that there are really no limits. That the only limits there are those that you impose on yourself. Don't limit yourself to taking only easy courses. Take hard courses and prepare yourself.
Chemistry.
Take chemistry. don't have to be, but don't take the easy way out. Take you can opt in to the harder courses in school. But you can't do that later on when the time has passed. So prepare yourself as strongly with strong credentials, and do the hard work, because it's nothing that comes easy is really as worthwhile as that you've had to work for. So I would tell young women and young men to really go for it. Take advantage of the opportunities that you have, and make those opportunities for yourself. Make it things that are unfamiliar to you become familiar to you. If you've never volunteered in a field, volunteer for that. And the summer, get a job in something you know nothing about. Broaden yourself.
And if you can't get a job, find an internship or search for a mentor.
Yeah, or even volunteer. Volunteer for taking care of animals. Volunteer for animals,
Dogs
or
need love.
or for seniors, or for children. That which builds your relationship to others, and broadens your field of knowledge in an area. Yeah, and connections are really, really worthwhile.
Any other final thoughts?
Well, I'm really glad to have lived as many years as I have lived, and to have seen as much change as I have
And
seen.
being part of that, making that change.
Well, being part of making a bit of contribution to the change. But I think the trying, and there have been more pluses and more rewards in seeing that change come true than anything
So the
that I
risk is
regret.
worth the reward.
Yes.